Hi friends, host Eric here. I was talking with famous people. I'm about to go in and do a presentation for a group of students here at this place in Chino Hills. This business is basically attempting to emulate the success of my former employer, Kudos. A lot of these businesses, all these Chinese-owned job schools, they know about Kudos. The Kudos is like the flagship. Talking with famous people. Ready for me?
I need the chair.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. So many people. Thank you.
Your laptop for projector.
I'm just gonna film myself, as I typically do. Hi everybody. My name is Eric Strauss, and wow, this is a full group in here. And I am a debate coach, speech and debate coach. I've been doing it for quite a long time now. I have a long history of success in this endeavor of speech and debate. So I'm here today to talk to you guys about a couple of different things. One, I'm talking to the parents, and two, I'm talking to the students. So the thing is, for students, let me start there. Speech and debate is different than anything you've encountered before in that it's real. When you go into a classroom and you learn material for, say, a history test, if you successfully get all the questions right, you get an A. But imagine a history class in which the only way you could get an A was to do better than everybody else. That's what debate is like. Whereas in regular class in school, you or your children are only able to achieve success as far as the situation allows. In other words, if a teacher is extremely difficult, your student will learn more but might not get an A. If the teacher is decently difficult, your student might get an A but won't learn as much as they possibly could. The reason is motivational as much as anything. Debate offers a legitimate motivation, whereas students typically do practice work throughout their career in school. If your students write an essay, it's not to publish on a blog. If your students write a paragraph for their elementary school, it's not to put in the newspaper. It's not for people to read. It's just practice. But competition flow debate is not just practice. It's a competition, just like any other sport. And as a consequence, what matters most of all in competition speech debate is the coach. If you have a good coach, somebody who genuinely cares and is incredibly smart, then your kids will be successful. So I want to talk to you a little bit today about what it is that you as a parent are going to use as a possible metric to decide whether you want to enter your kid into this class. And you as the students are going to use the possible metric to decide whether you think I'm qualified, competent, or worth taking a class from. Can I have a whiteboard marker? Sure. So I want to talk to you guys about four specific logics that people use to evaluate the legitimacy of something. Some people use logical reasoning. Some people use empirical reasoning. Some people use social reasoning. And some people use emotional reasoning. So these four logics, we all use them all. But some people prioritize some over others. One, logical reasoning. Number two, data or empirics. Number three, social or the symbols of competency. And number four, emotional or the authenticity with which the person is approaching you. So my message here is basically, according to all four of these logics, this is the class you want to enter your kid into. For logical reasoning reasons, how would you evaluate my legitimacy based on this metric? Well, you'd hear if what I'm saying is consistent with what else I'm saying. You'd hear whether or not the arguments I'm making now in favor of you entering your kid into this class make sense or not. And if I'm logically sound and make a lot of sense, for those of you who, if there's somebody who were only to prioritize this, that would be enough to convince you. But almost nobody is that easily convinced. Most people use some combination of all four. Data empirics. You'd look to see if I have a track record of success. If you wanted to check to see if I'm the right coach for your kid, you look at the empirics. Well, I have 4 national champions, 2 policy debate, 1 public forum debate, and 1 in declamation. I have a state champion, and I also have countless league tournament wins and so forth. My students over the course of the years have won hundreds and hundreds of trophies, and schools I've coached have won some of the biggest and most difficult to win trophies in the country. So the empirics clearly support that I'm competent and qualified to do this job, and probably somebody you want coaching your kid. The social cues. Well, if we were going to judge this on social cues, you'd say if I came up here today and I was in overalls and I had a piece of straw in my mouth and a hat on that said, I love trucks, well, then you would say this guy doesn't seem to be dressed appropriately for the circumstance. If we were, instead of in this beautiful facility here, if we were in a shack in the mud, you'd say this doesn't line up with these social expectations, the symbols of competence that I typically turn to. Well, fortunately, this does line up with those symbols. I am dressed appropriately. This place is a wonderful facility. You can see they've got all the necessary accoutrements, including this projector and this podium and everything. So it meets all these criteria as well. Now, last is the emotional one. If you were going to judge whether I'm qualified to coach your students based on the emotional metric, you'd make a determination on whether I'm authentic. Do I authentically care about teaching your kids? Am I authentically passionate about what I'm doing? Well, the answer is kind of ironic. I don't actually care about teaching your kids. What I care about is winning. And the only way I can win, only when my debaters learn more. It doesn't matter if they've learned 100 tons of learning. If the other guy has his kids learn 101 tons of learning, then I lose. So my authenticity is tied into the fact that I'm extremely competitive. I don't like to lose. I like to win. I have a long history of winning, and most of my students will tell you, if they were here to tell you this, they would tell you that if there's one thing I genuinely care about, it's that my kids are more well prepared for tournaments than the other guy's kids. I believe myself to be a better coach. As I said, I've got the empirics to prove it, but I'm not somebody who wants to rest on his laurels, and this last year, I basically did so. This is something that maybe will tie in with this as well. Well, why are you here, Eric? I mean, if you're so successful, why are you showing up here trying to recruit all of us into a new program? Well, because about a year and a half ago, I met my fiance and future wife, and for the last year, she and I have been dealing with a lot of like getting the house ready, like stuff like that. So this past year was my lowest level of success I've had my entire debate coaching career. I had only, for most of the year I had 5 students, and then for part of the year I only had 4 students because I was prioritizing other things. Now that I have settled into that relationship and no longer need to attend to it, I find myself coming back looking for a big squad. Last year, I believe I had the best debater in the country in Edmund Yu. And because I only had 5 debaters total, we only won 1 tournament in Lincoln Douglas. We won. We got 2 seconds and a third in public forum. That's not acceptable to me, and I don't like being that handicapped numerically. So here's what I have to tell the students now. I want to just spend a moment saying a couple things to you guys. My job is to get you guys to maximize your potential. If you are a student in any school that is a day school, your potential is not being maximized. Much of the time in class, you are sitting there while the teacher is dealing with attendance or dealing with behavior problems or dealing with giving you some more busy work to do so you can complete it and the teacher can say, look, I kept the kids busy. There will be zero busy work with me. There is no busy work. And the reason is because it doesn't help you win. If you want to know whether you've got a good teacher or not, ask them why you're being assigned a given homework assignment. And if they don't have an answer that sounds like this, I really tried not to have you guys do any work at home, but it was absolutely necessary that you guys master this particular thing in time for us to accomplish this particular thing, and this is the best way to achieve that goal, then they're not doing their job right. Now, it's fine. Almost no teacher can or will because they aren't coaches. Coaches compel a certain level of focus and intensity that teaching can never accomplish. Because I'm not trying to get a group of students to learn something. I'm trying to get my students to learn more than the other guy's students. And that maximizes learning impacts dramatically. Now, the last thing I would say about these are the 4 logics. There's also 4 habits or actions that you might talk about, or qualities that you need to look for to be successful. 1 being creativity. Another being follow through. The 3rd being wisdom from experience or learning from mistakes. And the 4th being intuition. What does this mean? Well, you need all 8 of these things if you want to be completely satisfied that you're going to be with the exact right person you want to be with. Creativity is necessary in debate because I have to come up with the kinds of cases we run to win. Follow through is necessary because if I'm not there making sure that they understand, and how do I make sure they understand? Not by giving them homework. I'll say, okay, here's the argument. There is a situation where we've got a reporter who's reporting on a government official negative stuff. He's getting that information from an anonymous source. And we want to understand whether we should protect that reporter's ability to do that stuff anonymously. If I'm going to make an argument that's constitutional, it's a certain kind of argument. Say, for example, that there's a constitutional prohibition on Congress making laws related to free speech. And that this ought to be considered inclusive of presidential actions, for example. The specifics of these arguments can parse on very small details. So it's a lot of verbal back and forth in the class. If I say, here's argument A, give me answer B, and they can't do it out loud, then they don't understand it. If they do it out loud and I ask them questions what it means, and they can't tell me, then they don't understand it well enough. And understanding is the key number 1 educational outcome you can have. Understanding, not any sort of grades or anything like that. And debate proves this. You can teach kids all till you're blue in the face, and you put them in a debate round and they'll get smoked. And why? Because you're not actually educating them, you're just teaching. Wisdom, experience, you gotta have an experienced coach who's made those mistakes before so we won't make them again. I had a quarterfinal round at Nationals. I had what had to be the best prep team there. I believe for sure they were the best team in the whole tournament. They cruised through preliminary rounds. When they got into quarterfinals, they lost to a team that was much worse than them. Why? They didn't eat anything all day. That's the sort of wisdom from experience that an experienced coach knows. Make your kids eat, right? Otherwise, who knows? That's the only explanation I can have for it. They performed the worst they've performed in years. The last one being intuition. Knowing where the truth lies and what's going to be effective. Having good instincts. These are the 8 things that we're talking about as means to judge, okay? So that's basically all I'm going to cover is that stuff right there. But then the last thing I will say before I open it up to any questions or comments is that you have a brief window of opportunity. My daughter is now 19 years old. And I tried to get her into a debate, but she's, with your own kids listen to you worse than other people's kids for some reason. You have a brief window of opportunity. If you get your kids learning speech and debate now, they will have advantages that will last them their entire life. The reason I am able to stand up here and do this and talk to you guys and hopefully convince you to enter your kids into this program is because I have experience and knowledge with both making argumentation, how and why things ought to be or ought not be, and I have experience with speaking in front of people. So I feel comfortable in front of a group, and I feel confident in speaking and selling my position. Every human being, when they enter adulthood, needs to have some extent of those skills. It's not possible for anybody in the world to go through life and never have to make their case for anything. Everybody's going to have to make their case for something at some point. And speech and debate is uniquely beneficial in those and many other areas in ways that you won't even begin to understand until you see it happen to your kid. So thank you for listening to my little spiel here, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions about anything. Yes?
Have you ever lost?
Yes, sure. I've lost plenty of times. What I would tell all parents and students when they first come into a competition class is the first tournament you go into competition, you are there to lose. You're there to lose and understand after you get out of that first tournament, oh, now I get what Eric was saying. So I'll tell you guys stuff about going into this first tournament. Before you go into your very first tournament, I'll say, remember, blah, 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 blah. And you'll go, okay, I understand. And then you'll go to that very first tournament, and you'll forget everything I said. But then when you're done with the first tournament, you'll come out of it and you'll say, oh, I understand what he wasn't joking. When he said we'd be better prepped than the opponents, he wasn't joking. I was better prepped. When he said I know the answer to the arguments they were making, he wasn't joking. He wasn't lying to me. I did have those at my disposal. Unfortunately, because of my very first tournament, I froze in the headlights, and these people who were experienced beat me. But now that I've had that experience, one tournament under my belt, next time I'm going to go in, I'm going to do substantially better. And there's a clear way to tell, for parents to tell, if I'm doing a good job or not. If you enroll the kid in the class and he's got 4 tournaments, let's say, over the course of the year, you can see the change in rounds won and lost over the course of those 4 tournaments. You'll see maybe they go 1-4 in the first tournament, 1 win, 4 losses. Maybe the second tournament they go 3-2, 3 wins, 2 losses. Maybe the third tournament they go 4-1, and now they're in break rounds and they can potentially win a trophy. By the 4th tournament, I expect them to be trophying. This is not an unrealistic or unreasonable expectation for you to have of your kids, to see them improve in measurable ways. So, and that's what you will see. And if you don't, I'm here to be held accountable for it, because I'm telling you right now what to expect to see. Expect to see that first tournament, your kid's not going to do very well. You're going to come with, oh, Mr. Strauss, I'm so worried. Don't worry about it. That's part of the process. Other questions? Yes.
I have 2 questions. One is for different children, different ages, and they're in different grades. So how do you divide them in different groups?
They're divided in only 3rd, 4th, 5th graders. This is grades. Can compete in elementary competition. And 6th, 7th, 8th graders compete in middle school competition. I don't usually do middle school speech. I just do middle school debate. Elementary, I'll do speech and debate. For 1st and 2nd graders, I have a curriculum that is sort of a pre-debate curriculum I can work with them on, but they're not eligible for competition. So it is possible to put the 1st and 2nd graders in with the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Because this is going to be a combination speech debate class, I'll function more like a project manager. Every student will prepare a speech or either a debate event for competition, and we'll spend the class time taking turns working on our respective things. So you can put the 1st and 2nd graders in here, but they won't be competing. They'll just be there learning, but not competing until next year or even the year after. If there are 1st and 2nd graders, I was told there might be. So for the 6th, 7th, 8th graders, I could put them all in one class and in one event, either public forum or Lincoln Douglas or potentially policy debate. One of the 3 debate formats. We'll cover just one of them. Probably we'll do public forum. It depends if I get how many middle schoolers I get. If you give me 4 middle schoolers, we'll have public forum debate. That's two-man team debate. Okay, it's more about public policy. public forum debate is about policy, mostly. And Lincoln Douglas debate is about philosophy. And policy debate is plan debate. It's also called CX. Plan debate. So plan debate is different than resolution debate. PF, or the resolution might say, it's a good idea for the United States to increase levels of troops in the Middle East. But plan debate would say, the United States should put 20,000 troops in Kuwait, in this city, on this date, whenever. So it tells you a specific plan of action. And so in these ones, both neg and af have cases. Neg and af are equivalent. One side saying the resolution is true, the other side saying it's false. In this one, neg and af are different. Af says, here's my plan. Neg says, your plan will never work. So we'll probably just stick with these ones. This is considered the most advanced format, and I typically don't do it with anybody under 7th grade. But these public forum can be started as early as 4th grade. Lincoln Douglas, I usually don't start till 6th grade. So I hope that answers that question. These are the groupings. I'd rather have the first, if there's enough to justify it, I'd rather have the 1st and 2nd graders in a separate group, simply because they're not competing. But we can work with them if they're all in one group, 1 through 5.
之后我们对课程的分级也会有一个详细的介绍。在老师讲完以后，我们现在就问一些关于课程内容的。到分级和价格分类的时候，我们课程怎么上，孩子们怎么上课，包括课时分类的时候，我们一会儿请 Franny 做具体的介绍。
Any other questions?
What's your typical class size?
Well, I mean, when I used to be the director and head coach at Kudos. In Temple City, I had 32 in my public forum class with 1 assistant coach. So I would say, in general, 12 to 16 is a good number for a debate class. For middle school competition, 12 to 16 students is good for 1 coach. You want to have, ideally, right around 8 to 12 or somewhere in there, because if you have too few, then there's a impact where of shared research work, so that if you have 10 or 12, everybody gets to use everybody else's shared research. So if I have Joe and Bob, they cut some cards and we did some work on this case, well then everybody can access Joe and Bob's work. And Mary, she did something on this, everybody can access that. So there's a cumulative benefit that's not huge, but somewhat up until about 16. However, ultimately, most of the stuff students are going to use in the cases I'm going to end up making anyway. So it's not a huge advantage, but it's a little bit of an advantage to have about 12 or 16. Yes?
So what do you think about the writing skill before you have a debate?
Okay, well, I used to be an English teacher before I was a debate coach. And one of the things I always had the most trouble with as an English teacher was teaching writing directly. The means that teachers are using in school to teach your kids how to write don't work. If you ask English teachers, you ask 100 English teachers, what's the best way to teach writing? They'll all give you different answers, because nobody knows. I do. I know the answer. The answer is debate. What's the best way to teach writing? Debate. Why is it the best way to teach writing? Because it doesn't teach it directly. It compels students to get in the habit of reading out loud fast and processing information quickly through very complicated and dense reading materials. It compels them to practice executing concision and using language effectively in speaking and in the debate round. And then when they come back, let's say they were to do debate a year, walk away from school, and come back after doing debate for a year, not having practiced any writing directly at all, they'd be vastly better writers. Why? Because they're accustomed to the organizational aspects of things. And ultimately, writing boils down to not vocabulary, a little bit grammar, but what it really boils down to is knowing what you're trying to say and how to get there. It's organizational. In debate, we learn about framework, for example. In the framework, we put the definitions, we put observations, and criteria. this establishes ground. Where's the legal ground for us to argue? This is what are obvious facts in the status quo. And this is how does the judge vote on who wins? How does the judge know who wins? Interestingly, this sort of framework isn't taught for essays. It should be, because if you're going to write an essay, you need to first of all know what your thesis is. How am I going to succeed in this essay? That's what your criterion is. If I'm going to in fact show that slave labor caused the downfall of Rome, well, if I'm going to write an essay on something like that, write an essay discussing how slave labor contributed to the downfall of Rome. How am I going to establish whether it did or not? I'm going to have to define some terms. I'm going to have to make some observations. I'm going to have to establish some criteria. So here's a term for slave labor. Here's a term for contribute substantially. Here's definitions for those. Here are observations that we know from history class about Rome. And here is how you, teacher or judge, are going to determine whether I succeeded in this essay. Did I meet my criteria? And then in the contention level, we have any given contention is comprised of four components. A claim. Oranges are healthy. A warrant. They have lots of vitamin C. And an impact. If you eat plenty, you'll live longer. They also have D. Framework links. Now remember, Judge, I defined healthy as that which makes you live longer. So if I can in fact establish that this vitamin C consumption helps you to live longer, then it is healthy, and I meet my own criterion and I win this point. Because we have to argue logically, because we have to follow things, because if you fail to make your point in the debate round, it's not like the teacher's going to say, oh, nice try, good job, A-. No, if you fail to make your point, your opponent gets up there and says, I cannot believe the garbage you just said. It was so terrible and wrong. Your wrongness is appalling and offensive to me. And here's why you're so wrong. So you have to actually own what you say. You don't have to own what you say in an essay. And teachers don't make the students own what they say. Teachers care about maybe grammar, maybe vocabulary, maybe including all the things in their rubric. They don't care about whether or not the person actually convinced anybody of anything. So that's why debate is absolutely the single best way to teach writing, because if you understand this, all of a sudden writing's super easy. Because that's all it is. You're trying to convince somebody of something. Other questions? Yes.
How the knowledge about the topic you are debating affect the result of debate?
Right. Okay, so the topic changes every month in public forum and every 2 months in Lincoln Douglas. The thing is, the topics are very advanced for middle school anyway. They're typically things like, well, the current Lincoln Douglas topic is, in the United States, reporters ought have the right to protect confidential sources. It's a shield law topic. So in that instance, what I'm going to be talking about in this public forum topic is a bunch of shield law stuff. So naturally, it's going to cover constitutional issues like the First Amendment, and why, in fact, a shield law is not specifically relevant to the First Amendment, because the First Amendment is about congressional laws, and a shield law is not about limiting the right of people to speak, but rather about protecting people's right to not speak. So we have to go over all those constitutional issues. And then, of course, we'll have to talk about the federal and state purviews of responsibility. And these are just a couple of things off the top of my head. The point is, when they finish the topic, all of a sudden they sort of happen to know now all about the limits of the First Amendment of the Constitution, the limits of the federal government, what they ought to be doing, and the state government, what each jurisdiction should be, and stuff like that. They can't help but learn that, because in order to win, they have to know that. And then the next topic comes out, and let's say it's something about probable cause. Like K through 12 students in the United States should enjoy the same standard of probable cause as do other individuals. And that was a topic from last year. So now all of a sudden it's a different constitutional right that's centered. It's a search and seizure right, Amendment 4, but the same sort of federal state purview stuff applies. So every topic they do, they take something away from that that's going to be useful in all the other topics, and they take some things away from it that are specific. Regardless, by the time they've debated for a couple of years, they know everything backwards and forwards. You know, by the time they've been with me for not very long, they'll be able to tell you a right is that which confers a duty upon another, a negative right is that which confers a duty of non-interference, positive right is that which confers, is that contractually obtained where you have a right to something, and entitlements and distinction. All these terms they'll learn quickly because they're necessary in most debate rounds. Many topics are security versus liberty. They break down to that. Other questions?
请问各位家长还有什么问题吗？还有问题都可以提出来。
Talking with famous people. Your kids will never learn anything as they will never learn as fast as they will with me in any other context. Other thoughts or questions? Okay, well, thank you.